I want to give you a visual of what it looks like when you either marginalize yourself or allow someone else to marginalize you. Now, I don't want to get fancy. Marginalization is simply containment. It's setting boundaries, limits. So we'll say containment field in this example because we're using plants that are in containers. The Akawu tells us that the great teacher is everything, everyone, every place, and every time. The great teacher today is going to be plants. So, as we said, a containment field is going to limit your potential for growth. Many of us like to talk about imaginary containment fields. When we talk about giving you the idea that you can grow beyond your container, we say things like, the container is all in your mind. It's an imaginary container. But I've put this plant in this container. And this small container is going to limit the potential for growth of this plant. The plant may outgrow its container. But after a while, the container is not going to give the plant everything it needs to survive. And this plant will die off if we don't get it into a larger container. So to give you a good gauge of how big this plant is, I'm going to use my hand as a measuring tool. That's the plant next to my hand. Now this plant that I've contained or put inside of this containment field is the same age as this other plant that I've put in a larger container. And you'll see by looking at this next plant that it has a greater potential for growth, and it has grown bigger than the other plant. So it would be unfair for me to put these two plants beside each other and say, it's something wrong with this plant. There's nothing wrong with this plant. This plant has the same potential for growth as this plant if I put it in a bigger container, if I widen its containment field. But right now, I'm in control of how big this plant is going to grow. So I could say that I think the plant's only going to grow this tall. So I could say that I think the plant's only going to grow this tall. But the plant might shock me and grow this tall. But this is still not the same potential as the plant that's in the larger container. So it's the containment field as well as the willingness to stay inside of this containment field that's going to prevent you from growing. Now some plants, because this container is too small, will reach over the side of this container and root itself in another container, or root itself in an area that has no containment field, that has unlimited potential to grow. And so in that case, this plant will ultimately grow larger than the plant that I have in its containment field. But some plants will not grow over the edge and will not go into another container. They're satisfied with this containment field that they're in. It's healthy, looks good, probably feels good, but it's not going to produce any fruit in this container. It may produce fruit or has a greater potential to produce fruit in this container. But if you come out of all the containers, your potential to grow fruit is maximized. As long as you're in a container, your growth potential is going to be limited by the size of the container. So you can work to expand the margins so that you can grow larger, or you can work to get rid of the margins so your potential for growth can be unlimited. So I hope we've given you a visual to help you understand that your potential for growth depends on the containment field that you are in, whether you put yourself there or someone else put you there. If you want to grow to your full potential, you're going to have to get rid of the containment field. How come that plant is so big and how come I'm so small? How come that plant is growing to its potential and I'm doing everything I can from within the confines of this container to grow to my potential, but my growth is either slowed down or stagnant because of the size of the container I'm in? It's not a bad thing to do a comparative analysis. And then you look over here and say, I need a bigger container. Or you could say, as a wise person would say, I don't want to limit myself as big as this plant looks, as healthy as this plant looks. I don't want to limit myself to the size of this plant. I want to grow even larger than this plant. I hope I'm not confusing you too much. So, remember, your potential for growth is going to depend on the containment field that you put yourself in or the containment field that someone else has put you in. Either way, you must get rid of the containment field in order to grow to your full potential. This has been Daku Akabo Wakatu.